Thanks again for coming out for the early session here. We do appreciate it. It's my honor to introduce our first presentation of the day. So I'm here to introduce the Danny Did Foundation, based out of Chicago. They've been around for 13 years. Danny Did Foundation works towards advancing public awareness, education, and disclosure between medical professionals and families afflicted by sudden, unexpected death of epilepsy, SUDEP. Foundation is named after Tom's nephew, Danny, who passed away from SUDEP. It's my honor to introduce Mary Duffy, the executive director, who will be in the room, as well as your speaker for today, Tom Stanton, president of the Danny Did Foundation.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining us this morning. I know it's always an exciting first day here at the Disneyland event, so we appreciate you spending some time with us. Like Steve said, my name is Tom Stanton, and I'm the president of the Danny Did Foundation, which is a nonprofit based in Chicago. Just to give you an overview of what I'm going to talk about today, I'm just going to start by sharing the story of my nephew, Danny, and then just talking about the condition of epilepsy, which many, if not all of you, are very familiar with. And then the cause of Danny's death, which was sudden unexpected death in epilepsy, or SUDEP. And then I'm also going to talk a little bit about epilepsy technology and its usefulness for patients and caregivers in our community. So first, I just want to introduce you to Danny. This is Danny here in the red shirt. He was an affectionate, loving, really bright boy who had 3 siblings, his oldest sister, Mary Grace, his older brother, John, in the orange, and a younger brother named Tommy. They're all 2 years apart. Danny had his first seizure around the age of 2, and his parents only witnessed about 4 subsequent seizures over the next 2.5 years. So he was relatively well controlled by medication, and he had no other medical complications. So fast forward just a few months before his 5th birthday, in December 2009, Danny visited his neurologist on a Tuesday, where he received a slight modification to his medication based on weight gain, and they were told essentially they were on a good path. And then it was 4 days later, on a Saturday morning, that Danny was found in his bottom bunk bed, and he had passed. So the first time his parents had learned the term SUDEP was from his death certificate. So my brother Mike, Danny's dad, and his wife Mary Ann started the Danny Did Foundation to fill gaps that they had experienced when they were treating Danny. The name of our organization comes from the last line of Danny's obituary, which my brother wrote, and it read, "Please go and enjoy your life, Danny did." And so that's the spirit with which we try to do our work. We try to have optimism and hope and community in mind as we move forward. So despite the tragic origins of how we got started, we really want to be hopeful and optimistic as we try to help other families. So Danny Did is focused primarily on 2 areas within the epilepsy community. The first is just to increase awareness. Many of you might know how underrepresented epilepsy is in the public at large, and certainly the risk of SUDEP is even more so underrepresented. So we really want to advocate for an honest and open dialogue about the risk of SUDEP between doctors and caregivers. Like I said, Danny's parents had never heard of SUDEP before he passed, and that's a story that we've heard many, many times since in the 13 years that we've been around. As you guys know, parents can and do digest difficult information all the time. And at the end of the day, it's our job as caretakers to consume information and then to shape the best possible treatment plan. So our first area of focus is disclosure and communication. Our second area of focus at Danny Did is to increase awareness about devices and technologies that alert to seizures. So to show you more about our story, I'm going to show a short video, and I'm going to just put the microphone up to my laptop, and hopefully if you can hear it in the back, just let me know.
It's been in every aspect of my life since I can remember.
There's just feelings of helplessness,
It's taken his future away.
the hypervigilance, the being on edge. All of a sudden, everything just kind of stopped.
How does epilepsy impact a life? There are as many answers as there are people with epilepsy. And each answer and each person tells the story of why Marianne and I started the Danny Did Foundation. For our son Danny, the effect of epilepsy was the loss of his life 3 months before his 5th birthday. The cause of Danny's death was sudden unexpected death in epilepsy, or SUDEP. But still today, the little Duffy, as his grandma Murtaugh called him, is front and center in our lives, and his energy powers the Danny Did Foundation's purpose to elevate awareness, so that families in our epilepsy community know that they are seen, that they are heard, and that they are cared for.
No child should die from epilepsy. Nathan was very much a comedian and a jokester. He always liked to make people laugh. One of my favorite things about Nathan was his hugs. He would give you the best hugs. I think that's what I really miss the most about him. No one ever mentioned the term SUDEP to me. I actually didn't even learn about it until after he passed away, unfortunately. I didn't know that you could actually die from it. It's actually how I came across the Danny Did Foundation by searching SUDEP. They provided so much support to me. They've given me a reason to put something positive into Nathan's death. I don't think I would have been able to get through the past 10 years without the Danny Did Foundation.
No family should feel like they are on their own. Jeffrey is 17 years old, and he is probably one of the funniest guys you would ever meet. He has autism, epilepsy, and an intellectual disability. I saw the Sammy camera, I reached out to Danny Did and filled out an application for financial assistance. Very quickly, Danny Did turned around and said, "Here you go." I've always been somebody who's loved cycling. Why don't I do it for a purpose? I was so grateful to Danny Did for what they had done for us and what they do for other families. Maybe I could do a fundraiser. Oh shoot, this is real now. I have to do this 100 miles.
In all 50 states and across 16 countries, the Danny Did Foundation has helped families like the Garcias gain access to seizure alerting devices. These life-saving tools can detect a seizure the moment it occurs. So how does epilepsy impact a life? It's a question that has weighed on millions of families. Thanks to our son Daniel George Stanton, the Danny Did Foundation is helping to change the answers.
I'll be right here next to you, as long as the world keeps spinning.
Our motivation is to help people with epilepsy enjoy full lives filled with opportunities. That's the promise we make to our Danny boy and to every family we meet.
I won't ever let you down.
So that just tells you a little bit more about who we are and our work. And I know I should have started this way, but I know there's a few families in the room that have lost a loved one, and I just want to, on behalf of everybody at Danny Did, express our condolences and invite you to be a part of our community. I think one of the most powerful things about our cause and causes like us is just the sense that you're not by yourself. There are other families, unfortunately, that have experienced a similar loss, and we're here for you and with you. So just talking about risk for people with epilepsy, before, like I said, before Danny passed away, they were not familiar with the term SUDEP. It had never been brought up by a neurologist. Amber in the video mentioned she had the same experience. So just talking through, things that are more commonly discussed: accidents, injuries, head trauma, the risk tied to swimming. Unfortunately, the increased risk for suicide, status epilepticus, all of those things are more commonly discussed than SUDEP, and we're trying to change that dynamic. A lot of people in the general public first heard the term SUDEP when Cameron Boyce passed away, which some of you may know. He was a Disney actor and a huge fan base, and that brought a lot of public attention to the term SUDEP. This slide shows the definition of what SUDEP is considered. And then there are some criteria that help a medical examiner arrive at this criteria. So some of those would include that the person has epilepsy, which is defined as recurrent unprovoked seizures. The person died unexpectedly while in a reasonable state of health. The death occurred suddenly during normal activity, so oftentimes during sleep, as was the case with my nephew. An obvious medical cause of death could not be determined at autopsy, and the death was not a result of status epilepticus or prolonged seizure clusters. So a common question that we get is, what causes SUDEP? Unfortunately, in most cases, the incident is not witnessed, and the patient is oftentimes found deceased in bed. So it's hard to kind of know what leads up to a case of SUDEP often. That was the case with Danny. So the precise reasons of what causes SUDEP are still being researched, and that's one of the most frustrating aspects of this condition, is that we don't know why exactly it happens. But there are definitely a few main theories. So there's the theory of cerebral shutdown, essentially when the brain is shut off after a seizure, that breathing would be suppressed and that a lack of respiration may be a primary cause. And there's a lot of SUDEP research ongoing. There was recently a published paper by a lab out of the University of Iowa that kind of investigates this particular theory of why SUDEP happens. And then another theory related to cardiac abnormalities, the idea that a seizure could cause a dangerous heart rhythm or even heart failure. And then there's the possibility that SUDEP may result from more than one cause or a combination of causes that could be slightly different for each case. In terms of how often SUDEP happens, the most recent research suggests that SUDEP occurs for 1 in 1,000 people with epilepsy, and that would apply to both adults and children. And then for people whose seizures are uncontrolled, that rate increases to 1 in about 150 people. So it's a dramatic difference, and that's why the lead headline for our messaging is how critical seizure control is. And that's going to mean something different for everybody. For Danny, maybe seizure control meant let's get this down to 1 per year. For other families, it might be dramatically different. So just knowing that there's different goals to strive for. Risk factors for SUDEP is a common question that we get. Uncontrolled tonic-clonic seizures at night present 2 of the greatest risk factors for SUDEP. So people who are in either or both of these categories, a high volume of seizures or convulsive seizures during sleep, are considered at greatest risk, and Danny would have fallen in that latter category. Some other risk factors that are being looked at include epilepsy beginning at an early having epilepsy for a long period of time, not taking medications regularly or as prescribed, and then lifestyle choices that instigate seizure activity. So as I mentioned, at Danny Did, disclosure is really key to our foundation. And we can and do disclose this risk to families on a regular basis if they haven't heard about SUDEP. But we always maintain that the best way to deliver this risk and have the conversation is from doctor to patient or doctor to caregiver. That builds trust. It helps the relationship just in many ways. I think parents gain a lot of respect for a doctor if they have that difficult talk with them. In 2017, the American Academy of Neurology and the American Epilepsy Society passed the first ever practice guideline on SUDEP, which essentially said that all patients should be counseled about this risk. That was significant because many providers prior to that had leaned on the idea that only the highest risk patients and their caregivers should be counseled. And we always tell the community that we as parents can be a part of this change by initiating the conversation. It's not optimal if you have to bring it up with your provider, but certainly we can help be a part of that equation. So this topic is something we're working on constantly, and we try to find different ways to put this in front of our patient community, to put it in front of the doctor community. And one of the efforts we were part of recently was with Duke University. And there was a survey put out to caregivers about how they want to learn about this risk. What are their preferences? And the biggest takeaways, as you can see on the slide, was that caregivers want to receive the information about SUDEP from their healthcare provider, but that they typically, in reality, hear about it elsewhere. So you can see the disparity between what caregivers desire versus what is the current standard of care with these statistics on the slide. There was a few open-ended questions as part of the survey, but the big takeaways from those open-ended questions was that caregivers value learning about SUDEP from their healthcare provider, the importance of pairing SUDEP risk disclosure with a discussion about how to reduce the risk, so not just telling them, hey, this is out there, this is possible, but giving some steps on how to try to reduce the risk. And then the need for educational resources and peer support. And that's where organizations like Danny Did can be helpful. The idea that you walk out of that conversation with something in your hand that you can look back on and review at a later point. But these findings highlight the urgent need for interventions to improve communication about the risk of SUDEP. We know there's no 100% prevention tactic for SUDEP, but we believe there are steps that we can promote to patients and families to minimize the risk. And so this slide here talks through some of those ideas. And the first one we mentioned is communication, and referencing back to that Duke study, just the idea that if you have no idea that this is possible, there's no way you can take steps to try to protect your loved one from it happening. The idea of maximizing seizure control via strict treatment adherence. Sometimes when we talk to doctors about why they do or don't talk about this risk, one of the reasons that they do talk about it is the idea that the patient will be really locked in on whatever their treatment is. For a lot of people, that's medication. For some people, it might be diet. But they'll know, hey, this is super important that I am following this to the highest degree. Regular doctor visits if convulsive seizures are not completely controlled. Sounds really simple, but it's really important. And the ideal being that those doctors are to a specialist, which I'm sure most of you know in epilepsy is called an epileptologist. Ensuring that family members and caretakers have knowledge of seizure first aid and they know your seizure action plan. There's a new toolkit that we want to call out called preventingepilepsydeaths.com. We encourage you to review it. It's a website essentially, and there's tools for both doctors and patients and parents about reducing risk. And it's not only specific to SUDEP, it's about all forms of mortality in epilepsy. And then the last point being considering the use of alternative resources such as monitoring devices that can detect certain seizures and alert caregivers and enable early intervention. And this last piece is a main focus for us at Danny Did. So technology within epilepsy is a fast-growing field. We consider devices and technologies as a complement to medication, surgery, diet, as part of the patient's treatment plan. So on this slide, you can see some of the reasons that we believe devices can be beneficial for families. We view these resources as a piece, another kind of component of a caretaker's toolkit. A device is not going to replace your instincts, your vigilance, but monitoring and alerting can be one piece to a puzzle, just providing backup that you will be notified if a seizure takes place. We always give the analogy of when our kids or spouses or loved ones are in an EMU, they're always being monitored. There's always an alert when a seizure happens. And then you go home, you go to school, you go to work, and oftentimes there's not that safety in place. And so we think it's really important to know when seizures are happening when you're outside the hospital setting as well as when you're at the hospital. So we also spend a lot of time talking about why these systems can be beneficial to doctors as well. And this slide lays out some of the arguments that we make. The third bullet, in terms of how often seizures are taking place, most of you probably know, the management choices when it comes to treating epilepsy are typically guided by how often seizures are happening. A lot of times, a patient may or may not know that a seizure is happening, or a caregiver may or may not be able to record every time a seizure happens. And that's when technology can help. Having an accurate count of how often seizures take place is really critical to the whole rest of the equation. So a common question that Mary and I get at Danny Did is, what device should we use? And it's not a simple question. It's not a one-size-fits-all answer. The marketplace and the pipeline are always growing. This is an area where we can be a resource. We spend a lot of time tracking what's available now, what's coming. And our role is not to recommend or endorse a specific product, but simply to let parents and patients know what their options are. So before picking a device system, it's important to go through a checklist of sorts, just common sense considerations. And we have a brochure that covers this checklist at our table if anybody would like to grab it. But this slide lays out the 5 steps that we recommend, starting with just deciding what is it that you're trying to alert to? What types of seizure does your loved one experience? And then determining if the system professes to be able to alert to that type of seizure. Different seizure types can be detected by different methods. So we encourage patients and caregivers to talk with their doctors about if and how their seizure type can be detected. As far as determining goals for the device, everybody's got to lay out what's your motive, and 2 examples of that would be we want to be notified when a seizure occurs. So having someone with the child during or shortly after a seizure, that might be a main goal. For that goal, a consideration is how does the device send alerts? Is it through an audible alarm, a text message, a flashing light, an email, a phone call? That's important to investigate. And then another goal might be to track how often seizures are occurring. In that scenario, you'd have to ask, is your child willing to be monitored? How does the device store data? Is the data secure? Can you share the data with your doctor? And some of that might be variable based on the age of the patient. Considering the comfort and relevance of the device, so it sounds obvious, but no device is going to be effective if it's not used correctly. So considering something like, will the device be physically comfortable to wear? Is your child emotionally comfortable to wear it? Are there age or weight restrictions? Is use restricted to the bedroom? Can it be worn elsewhere? Is it water resistant? How is it powered? How long does the charge last? All of these really important but practical considerations. The fourth one, determining the ease of setup. Looking into if the company provides tutorials, how is their customer service. You really want to investigate that before you commit to picking your particular device. And then the last one is obvious, but just considering the cost. A lot of these systems have multiple costs, so there might be the initial cost for hardware and then, say, an ongoing monthly subscription. And then is there anything else that you need to buy in order for the device to work? So, for example, having a smartphone for the patient or other technologies that might be required. So we feel strongly about the concept of early intervention. If you're present, you can take action. You can have a chance to keep your loved ones safe and potentially prevent injuries. Maybe you're administering rescue medications, or you just want to be there in the room because nobody should be alone during a seizure. Within epilepsy technology, there are a range of device types. Many of you may know there's implantable options like VNS, RNS. At Danny Did, we primarily counsel about non-invasive seizure alerting devices. And this slide shows some of the range of what's out there. No device is perfect. No device company right now can claim to prevent SUDEP. But we're dedicated to seeking out the technologies that are designed to get somebody present so you can be there and do a well-being check. And so I'm going to talk through just some of the non-invasive systems that are available right now. They fall into one of these categories that you're looking at on the screen. This list is not exhaustive. There's more in development. And like I said, there are other technologies like implantable systems that I won't talk about. So one big category is nocturnal monitoring. Many of you might experience seizures that happen during sleep. I know for our family, it was news that seizures even could happen during sleep. I think when families are new to epilepsy, that's not even known, but a pretty high percentage of all seizures are believed to happen while the person is sleeping. And so there's the vulnerability of not knowing, when these are going on. I know for Danny, there was a lot of co-sleeping. There was a lot of bed checks. There was a lot of sleepless nights, and that's something that we've seen and heard about quite a bit over our 13 years at Danny Did. So nighttime can be scary. This slide mentions a few devices that are meant to monitor and alert during sleep time. So the MFit movement monitor is just a thin device that goes between the mattress and the box spring, and it makes an audible alert that sounds in the room when there's seizure-like activity occurring. This company is based in Texas, and this company is one of the first in this space for seizure alerting systems. The other one mentioned here is the SAMI. This company is based in Colorado. It's set up very much like a baby monitor, so you have a camera mounted on the wall, and then there's a second device that would be in the caregiver's bedroom, and through that device in the bedroom, you can get a visual look into the room at any time. If there is certain types of movement detected, then the alert would signal through the device in the parent's room, at which point you could get up and do a well-being check. If there is an alert that's triggered, the system begins to record, and a lot of families like the ability to share that visual recording with their provider. A lot of times the doctor will say, we need to see what it looks like, and this is a system that could help with that. As I go through these, just the backdrop, if you have any questions, we'll try to answer them at the end of this session, and we also have a table. So if there's specific questions, we'll do our best to talk through them. There's a category of wearable devices for individuals that have seizures, maybe day or night or just during the day. There are wristband sensors as well as mobile apps that are compatible with different types of watches, the Apple Watch, Android watches. These devices allow an individual to maintain a sense of independence, to go to work, to go to school, to go to a sleepover, with the comfort to the caregiver knowing that they will receive an alert in the instance of certain types of seizures. So on this slide you can see 3 examples: the Embrace, the Inspire, and an app called Seize Alarm. And they're meant to help with this idea of remote monitoring, sending a text message or an app notification when there is certain types of seizures that take place. Pulse oximeters, we just saw one at our table today. They're medical devices that are typically attached to a fingertip or toe to measure heart rate and blood oxygenation percentage. So those are vital statistics that are affected while a person is seizing. These devices, as you guys probably know, are not designed or manufactured to detect seizures, but pulse oxes do have applicable monitoring and alarm sounding functions that can be useful to someone who is experiencing seizures. One company that makes these is called Masimo, and you can read more about that company at our website. Also on our website, just want to flag, we have a series of webinars that we call Dissecting Devices. So all of the systems that we've talked about today and a few more are archived there. It's typically about 45 minutes. We have a representative of each company that we've talked to, ask questions, and then a Q&A that fell afterwards. So if you see one of these and it seems of interest, going to our website to look up those webinars could be useful for you. So we're not here to pretend that devices are a cure-all, that they're perfect. This slide highlights some of the challenges that exist right now. The third slide, I'll just make a comment that no currently available device can capture an alert to multiple seizure types. That's something that many families want and need. But we don't have that yet. There's efforts in place, ongoing, but that's still to come. This space is kind of in its infancy, but rapidly changing. Obviously, the access piece is huge. Most of these are not covered by insurance, and that's something that we try to help with at Danny Did. In terms of what's coming in the pipeline, again, we're in the early stages, but devices in general are becoming more sophisticated and more reliable. Detection for generalized tonic-clonic seizures to alert caregivers is pretty strong right now. Detecting other types of seizures is the next chapter. Forecasting and predicting predicting seizures, that's coming as well. So we have a few partnerships that we try to, where we try to help move this space forward. One is at a conference called the Device Pipeline Conference. There's a Shark Tank competition. Many of you might be familiar with the ABC show Shark Tank. So there's the equivalent kind of in our community where we're trying to incentivize new innovative solutions for this space. We also help to host what we call a device accelerator course for startups in this space who have needs, questions about how to get to market. And so that's something we've done the last 2 years. We'll do it again this year. It's a 6-week virtual course that we co-host with the Epilepsy Foundation. And so that's something where we want to be available to the people, the makers in our community who are wondering, what does the community need? So one of the biggest challenges I mentioned is access. You know, somebody might hear about a solution or a potential solution and not be able to afford it. And that's where we put a lot of our time, money, resources is into bridging that gap. Many families come to Danny Did and want to know, how can I get a device? Some of our conversations are just informational. We educate them about their options. They go and they buy it, and that's it. But many of them have a financial barrier. And so that's where we can be a resource. If there's a financial barrier, a family or adult patient can apply for a grant, and then we have a process to help them through that. And the process essentially is they apply, we have a phone call, we talk through what they're looking for, and then we make a decision about whether there's going to be a fit. We do our best to keep in touch with every family to make it very personal. As you guys know, epilepsy is a very kind of customized condition. There's a lot of nuance to it. And so we want to make sure to the best of our degree that we're not getting people's hopes up where there's not likely to be a good return. So if anybody wants to stop by our expo table, we have resources about the device grant program in English and Spanish, and we're happy to share those. This next slide, I just make a call out for a conference that we're very involved with called Partners Against Mortality in Epilepsy, or PAMI. And this is back to that comment I made about community for the people who have lost. This is a coming together of families who are living with epilepsy, families who are bereaved, clinicians, researchers, advocates, industry, and it happens in Orlando at the end of November. We do have travel grants available for this meeting if anybody is especially interested and wants to talk with us about it. We are always excited when families want to become involved with our cause. There are many different ways that can happen. We have something called Team Danny Did, where a person could jump in and do an event that's meaningful to them, a walk, a bike ride, a marathon. We have an associate board, we have family ambassadors, we have student ambassadors. So we have a small kind of core footprint in Chicago, three staff people and a board of directors, but through our larger community of ambassadors, we can make a bigger difference. And I'll just close by saying we're here to help. We don't have all the answers, but we try to help families get to resources, even if we can't provide them. So we have a lot of collaborations. We do a lot of partnering with other advocacy organizations. So if we can be useful or helpful, or if you guys want to bounce things off of us, we just talk parent to parent, patient to patient. So we're always happy to connect, either here in person or after the meeting. Please reach out to us if we can be helpful. And with that, thank you for your time, your attention, and if there's any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Any questions? Sure. I'm afraid.
I was just wondering, like, what about adults that live alone? Is there anything on board about developing something where they're being sent to someone else that's not in the house with them?
Yeah, that's a great question. The question you might have heard, adults that live alone, what is out there for them? I mean, I think the first thing I would think of would be the watches that could, alert to someone who's not with that person. So we've heard, let's say a child's going off to college or child's taking a bus to their job. Having the remote alerting could be one option. So that's something to think about. Mary's gonna.
And just keep in mind, if you live alone, you have to have your seizure action plan. So does it involve your next door neighbor who has the key to the house? So if you do have these, you do wear a watch and you live alone, you just have to make sure you have a very specific seizure action plan with your key players, knowing that you have this alarm that will be sent to their phone. And what do? Do they have a key to your house? Do they call your next door neighbor? So again, who would come to your aid at that time? So it's just another step, but something that could be really helpful.
Thank you for kicking off the questions.
So my question, a lot of these devices that are out there are specifically more or less for tonic-clonic or movement-based seizures. If you have the iFlutter or island myoclonia with absence, and those tend to be clusters, there's no warning, so unless somebody is there, there's no device out there. Is there something in the pipeline like that? Because I know why the seizure dogs alert to seizures is because of the chlorine ion-based scent that comes off of the skin of the body of the patient. So is there going to be devices developed like that?
You want to take that?
Yes, we have heard in the pipeline that that's really what they want to work on. They want to be able to handle the whole population, not just the population that's having tonic-clonic or movement with their seizures. And some products that are in the work across the world too, this isn't just in the United States, would be, for instance, something that's worn in the ear, on the head, that's looking at, it's an EEG, if you will, that would pick up seizure activity in the brain, not the movement, not the way it presents itself. So they are aware of that and want to help absent seizure patients as well. So there's things in the works. It's a slow process, unfortunately. To get things FDA approved and get them in the hands of customers. But that's what Danny did, and quite a few organizations partner with us on these. Epilepsy Foundation, as well with their accelerator and their short tank competition. There's also something that's called, new to us, new to Danny did, their Here Go, the Eureka Sleep. You wear a ring at nighttime, and it does look at different heart rate, I think oxygen level as well. So if you're having those type of seizures and that's impacted, that does change. It's something that they could not only track for you so you can look at it in the morning, but alert as well. So we've only helped 2 families with that product, so we don't have a lot to say yet, but they're here. Again, and Eureka's asleep.
Any other questions?
I just had a question. When you said the heart could be attributed to the sudden death on this, would that be like an AFib?
I think I don't want to over speak on this because I'm not a medical professional, but I think the idea being that there is a place for your neurologist or your epileptologist to potentially connect with a cardiologist, to have that conversation, to try to make that connection.
When my son has seizures, he'll AFib, it just goes into AFib a little bit, his heart does some weird things, so that you just kind of,
Yeah.
I don't think I
Yeah, and I think triggering those kinds of possible connections can be valuable, so that maybe there's a treatment path that hasn't been explored that could be. Yeah.
And that's true with most conditions, meaning, collaborating and coordination of care is so important. So making sure you are telling your neurologist that you're seeing another doctor for another condition is very important, and it's kind of neat to see them come together with a different treatment plan to make sure that they're doing all they can to keep you safe.
Anyone else?
And you may have talked about this, I missed the first part of the presentation, and I'm sorry if this is not the place to ask this question, but all these things are great, but if we don't know about SUDEP, we can't do that, and I know that people are, that's been discussed, but I'm tired of discussing that, I want to do something, change the standard of care.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you hit it on the head there. Like, the disclosure piece is paramount. In our opinion, everything starts from the fact that a parent is empowered enough to know, or an adult patient, hey, this is a risk, and now let's figure out how to reduce it and eventually eliminate it. Hopefully with research and figuring out why it happens. So, 100% the case, and we do, we have a billboard in the Anaheim airport right now. We do wrap buses, we'll do radio, we do TV, like whatever we can do from our corner of the world, we're trying to do in terms of the awareness, about epilepsy, but specifically about SUDEP. Because I think the more families that know about it, we'll all become empowered to make more noise. That'll be obviously in front of our healthcare providers, and I think the wheels will start to turn faster. It's a huge issue that needs to be addressed.
And one more thing to mention is Danny did partner with over 20 organizations and doctors and neurologists recently for the PreventingEpilepsyDeaths.org website. On that, it's a toolkit. On there is information for doctors to feel more comfortable. There's models, communication models, to have this discussion. And also, to your point, like, okay, now I know about the risk, what do I do? And quite a few things that you can look at to see what is my treatment plan, and can it be improved in any way? And feeling empowered to not accept, not accepting how many seizures you're having, but trying to reduce that and having that conversation with your doctor. Is it time to relook at medications? Is it time to coordinate care? Is it time to discuss surgery? Diet, what are the different things that you can do so that we can do all in your power now that you know to act and to be empowered to make change, behavioral change.
But most of us don't know and don't know that.
Yeah. Right. Right. That's a very sad reality that we've seen way too many times, and I'm sorry for your loss. Yeah. Yeah.
Does it always occur in sleep?
Question was, does SUDEP always happen during sleep? I don't think we can definitively say yes. I think that's oftentimes the case, but there have been occurrences where cases of SUDEP are believed to happen while the person was not sleeping. Yeah.
Anyone else with a question?
Thanks again for your time. Yeah, and appreciate it.